Okay guys, sorry for the delay. I'm back now with just a couple more examples to show you of how you can kind of restructure things a little bit to make your arguments more persuasive. I mentioned in my previous example with Jason's draft that you definitely want the tone, the focus, the overall purpose, and driving force of your argument to be persuasion. You don't want it to be informing people, you don't want it to be exploring the issue, you don't want it to be reflecting on the issue or narrating a process. It's a very specific goal that you're trying to achieve. And one of the things I saw in several of, especially the more underdeveloped drafts that were posted, is that there's a lot of information being provided and yet not a whole lot of persuasive appeals being made to kind of unify that information toward an overall argument. And there's a big difference between a essay that is informative and an essay that's persuasive. So I'm going to go into Sophia's draft real quick, and again, I'm only picking on people here that I think are pretty much on the right track, but I think she could rework things in a way that would be helpful for everyone. Actually, I think it was Phoebe's. I'm sorry, not Sophia. Sorry, Sophia. Yours is just a little too underdeveloped at this point to be able to provide any real useful critique that would be helpful to other people. Of course, you'll get a good critique, hopefully, from a peer. Was Phoebe's, my bad. So here's her essay on same-sex adoption. She goes right into the counter-argument here. She has one reason or one point here, a second point here, another point here, and then kind of a suggestion here that this argument is in favor of same-sex adoption. So I'm going to try to show how this can be reworked to be, number one, a more effective thesis that would help structure the overall essay, but then also a little bit less of an informative discussion and more of a persuasive discussion. So first of all, overall the thesis is strong, but you do want to have a direct statement of your proposal tied to your reasons, and I would put your reasons in order. Don't let your proposal itself interrupt the reasons. That's just logical. You're kind of moving through each point and then therefore something in favor of same-sex adoption. And here I would actually say this needs to be revised to be a more direct proposal than just saying I am in favor of same-sex adoption, but what exactly should be done? What should people do? What should the government do? What should lawmakers do, etc.? So here's point one, here's point two, and then this reason just needs to be stated a little bit, again, more persuasively. So something like, and finally, the amount of children in foster care could be placed in homes. I would say maybe just like a large amount to be a little bit more specific here. A large amount of children that are in foster care could be placed in homes with same-sex parents. Therefore, something should be done in favor of same-sex adoption. And then, according to this, the very first point from the thesis should be the counter-argument that many Americans would argue that a child needs both a mother and a father in their life. However, that point doesn't come up until here, so I would just move this paragraph up to right after the introduction because that is where it would go according to your thesis. Then you would need a paragraph saying that psychological studies suggest there are little to no adverse effects when a child is raised in a family consisting of same-sex parents. So that would be a great flow, I think, from this surprising reversal counter-argument into that point. However, this first reason in your body of the essay as it is now is more of a connection to your second point from the thesis. So just make sure that you're following along with your points in order from the thesis. So this one first, and then this one for second. So let's see. And then this is the third point. And then this is the proposal. So actually, Phoebe would need to add here a point paragraph discussing the idea that psychological studies suggest that there are no adverse effects. So I would just provide that as a copy, or excuse me, as a topic sentence down here, and I'll just copy it as a placeholder. And I'm going to edit this because it'll come at the beginning. So one commonly used argument that's used to defame same-sex marriage is that their children will not turn out as well as children raised in a role with both gender roles. And then the next paragraph, however, psychology suggests that there are little to no adverse effects when a child is raised in a family consisting of same-sex parents. And then one of the ways a family consisting of same-sex parents can be adversely affected is from outside influences. I would maybe slow this down a little bit and connect to the language. Oh, you do. Never mind. Scratch that last comment. So that follows right along. And then going right into the another counter argument that corresponds directly to this point here, that's fine. And then the last point about foster care, and then it seems like there is a proposal in this conclusion, but that proposal actually needs to be added to the thesis as I stated before, and then separated it out into its own paragraph separate from the conclusion where you would recap your entire thesis. So that's just one example of how you can move from a counter-argument, surprising reversal statement in your thesis into each of your main points, and then your final overall central claim unifying all those points. And then you can mimic that exact same progression in the body paragraphs of your essay, while maybe also throwing in a counter-argument or two as it corresponds to each of the individual points you're discussing along the way. So that's why I wanted to pull that one out. And then I also wanted to pull out Kara's because Kara's is probably the strongest example we have up here so far this week. It's probably the closest to being ready to go. It's not surprising because it's up there first. She's obviously spent a lot of time working on it already. But one thing I, again, will point out is that it's still very easy to accidentally structure our paragraphs in a way that is more informative than persuasive. So Kara has a very strong thesis here with a surprising reversal statement. She has her overall proposal unifying everything, and then she has her reasons 1, 2, and 3. And then she has just kind of a little bit more explicit statement of what her overall proposal is, to kind of tie it all together again, because that's what the central claim does. And then if you read the essay, you'll see that Kara is actually following along with each of these individual points in order in the body of the essay. She talks about the counter-argument first, then her point about pain and suffering, then her point about dignity, then her point about autonomy, then her actual proposal, and then her conclusion. And that's perfect. That follows along with the thesis exactly. However, this essay still runs the risk of sounding more informative than persuasive because of the topic sentences. And so again, Kara, you're doing a great job. I'm not picking on you, but I think it's a good example for everyone to see. So even though in the thesis Kara says, while many people might believe that physician-assisted suicide undermines the professional integrity of a physician, when we get to that actual paragraph in the body of the essay, the topic sentence is, the Hippocratic Oath is the ethical code that medical professionals have pledged themselves to. So as a reader, I have to make a leap in my own mind about, or from the professional integrity of a physician to the Hippocratic Oath and ethical codes of physicians or medical professionals. And while that connection may be clear, it's not necessarily going to be clear for all your readers, and so by forcing the readers to make that connection themselves, you're almost inviting another counter-argument or just offering an opportunity of weakness in your argument. And so all you would need to do is add to this paragraph a truer or stronger topic sentence that states your claim first. And that's really more persuasive than informative because right now this is a fact. It is a fact that medical professionals have to pledge the Hippocratic Oath, take the Hippocratic Oath as a pledge. That's not a claim. So this would be more of an argument rather than an informative essay if I started with this writer's claim, and then I can go into the information. And that's just logical. This is how our brains work. If I hear a claim at the beginning of a paragraph and then read a bunch of information, I am going to automatically, logically interpret this information as supporting this claim. That's just what makes sense to people. So you want to play into that as a writer and kind of fulfill those expectations, but also make the connections for the reader. Don't expect them to do it themselves. So if you're going to use some language up here in your thesis, be sure to repeat that language in your topic sentence so that the reader can kind of clue in and so that it sounds more persuasive. Okay, let's go to the next paragraph. With a terminal diagnosis comes a lot of pain and suffering. Again, this is a fact. I don't know that anyone could really argue this. It's a terminal diagnosis. Physical and emotional, that's kind of the definition of a terminal diagnosis. So if I was going to make the connection stronger for the reader and make this more persuasive, what I would need to do is first introduce my point in connection to my overall central claim. So maybe something like this from the thesis. So, physician-assisted suicide should be granted to a terminally ill patient of sound mind as it shows compassion by eliminating pain and suffering, period. With a terminal diagnosis, of course, comes a lot of pain and suffering. And so this, although it may sound repetitive, is actually going to be a lot stronger of a connection for your reader to follow along with. And you can basically do that for all of these point paragraphs. So another reason why physician-assisted suicide should be legalized is because it helps preserve a sense of dignity for the terminally ill patient, period. A strong sense of dignity is something that people work their whole life to attain and deserve to have intact during their last breath. So again, it's not so much that you can't use the information that you have here. It's just that you also need to add a stronger topic sentence that directly presents your point from the thesis in connection to the overall central claim that you're arguing for, which in this case is the proposal for allowing physician-assisted suicide. And then here again, patient autonomy is a practice concept in the medical field. That's a fact. Are you informing me of this, or are you trying to make an argument about physician-assisted suicide? If the latter, then you need to say that in the topic sentence for your paragraph. So the final reason why physician-assisted suicide should be legalized is because it helps preserve patient autonomy. And then again here, this is a fact. Oregon was the first state to legalize physician-assisted suicide. Yes, that is absolutely true. But it would be a better transition and a more persuasive appeal here to say instead, because it preserves, or excuse me, because it prevents pain and suffering, because it preserves autonomy, and because it preserves dignity, or you would reverse those last two, physician-assisted suicide should be legalized in the United States the same way it has already been legalized in Oregon. And that would just, provide a stronger transition because you'd be recapping the points you just made and then directly stating your proposal, and then you can go in to talk about, all the specifics of, is your proposal feasible? How are you going to implement it? Which Kara is doing a great job with here. So, and then the conclusion, you recap everything. So again, just to distinguish, your proposal paragraph does need to be separate from your conclusion because the conclusion recaps everything in the argument, including the proposal, but also all your points, and if you use surprising reversal, that counter argument that you used it for. Okay, so hopefully these examples provided some information that will be useful for your own draft, and if you have any further questions about your drafts specifically, you can always email me. And then I just want to remind you guys for your critiques that you're going to do for homework, remember the deadline is tonight at midnight. You have to answer all of these questions for the person you critique, as well as provide in-text comments on the draft itself. And then be sure to comment on someone who hasn't yet received feedback from anyone else. So I know that Emily's essay has already been reviewed by Kara. Tabitha has said she will review Kendall's, and Stephen has reviewed Matthew's, although Stephen, you need to go back and answer these questions. So the rest of you can comment on Jason's, Cassandra's, Phoebe's, Tabitha's, or Sophia's, or Peter's, excuse me. So if you have any further questions about that part of the assignment, please let me know. And then, of course, don't forget to do your reflections at the end of the week on Sunday, focusing on what you learned and what you're going to change for your revisions. So again, let's just keep up the good work this week and finish strong, and hopefully it'll be a smooth sail for the rest of you until the end of the semester. Thank you.